We are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another DIP Hangout with today's topic being self-forgiveness. Here with me is Dan Malera. Hi, Dan.
Hi, Kim. Nice to be here with you all.
Cool. We have both been walking with Desteni and... Oh, hold on. Yeah. So, sorry, we've both been walking with Desteni and the Desteni I Process for a substantial amount of years, and we've thus built up our own experience with the tool of self-forgiveness as a tool of self-support and self-change. So in this hangout, we're going to be focusing specifically on this one tool of self-support, which is self-forgiveness. We're going to try our best to, through sharing the experiences, insights, and understanding that we've gathered each individually in our own personal process of applying and practicing self-forgiveness so far, we're going to try and provide an initial and introductory insight into what self-forgiveness is, why we practice it and apply it, and how you yourself can start delving into this process of self-change through self-forgiveness. So for anyone watching this hangout who might be hearing about self-forgiveness for the first time, it might be a good idea for us to start this hangout off with clarifying and giving our perspective on what self-forgiveness is to us. So Dan, how would you, in your own words, describe what self-forgiveness is if you'd have to describe it to someone who's entirely new to it?
Okay. Well, if we take like the definition of forgiveness is kind of like a letting go of anger and resentment that you have towards someone else for something that they've done wrong or something they've done to you. So self-forgiveness would be really this point of taking myself and seeing something that I've done as a mistake or something wrong or something that I basically am not okay with that I've done. Usually that kind of stuff gets separated and suppressed and segmented away so that I don't have to face the bad parts of me because that doesn't agree with my ego. My ego only wants to see the positive stuff. So self-forgiveness can be definitely challenging at first, but it's really a way to unearth those suppressions and take responsibility for the points of me that I have not enjoyed or that I don't like about myself, or if I've done something bad or something that I'm not proud of or something like that, then I would use self-forgiveness to kind of retake ownership of that point while also releasing it.
Cool. And you bring up a very interesting point, actually, which is the definition of forgiveness, which was to release or to let go of anger or resentment that you have towards someone when they've made a mistake or have done something wrong. That was okay. Which is very interesting because that point of, I've done something wrong or or they've done something wrong seems to be the reason why you'd have to forgive someone else or yourself. And I find that, sometimes when I try to talk about self-forgiveness or when I try to explain self-forgiveness to someone, that's the point that they bring up. Like, but, I haven't done anything wrong. Why would I have to forgive myself? I haven't done anything wrong, right? I haven't made any mistake, which is because of this definition of forgiveness that is out there, which is connected to this point of, having done something wrong, having made a mistake. This is why we can't forgive other people, and this is why we can't forgive is because they've done something wrong. And so in some way, within that, forgiveness is actually seen as like a bad thing or something that you only do because of something bad, which is actually, as I've discovered with myself, is actually not the case at all. If anything, most of the time I would do self-forgiveness, or I would use self-forgiveness to actually release those ideas, to release those beliefs that, there's something wrong, that I've done something wrong, that somebody else has done something wrong, that those kind of judgments that I may have about myself or others, where actually self-forgiveness becomes a point of giving myself and others the freedom from those judgments that we have about ourselves and each other, where we believe that some things are wrong, some things are bad.
Mm. Yeah, that's a cool point, because the self-forgiveness in itself, you could be tainted by that definition of something being wrong, but within releasing that, it becomes, almost like an exponentially powerful tool to really get the feel for what's going on in our minds, and get to self-honesty.
Yeah, because also with forgiveness, it's like you automatically kind of accept that belief or that idea that somebody's done something wrong, or that you've done something wrong. Like, you need to be forgiven because you've done something wrong. So that point of having done something wrong is like automatically accepted. Whereas with self-forgiveness, it's about questioning things. It's about questioning all things, questioning the belief that somebody's done something wrong, that you've done something wrong, questioning the very judgment that you have about things, the very beliefs where you separate things between right and wrong and good and bad. So in that aspect, it's like, it's a very different kind of thing, self-forgiveness, compared to the definition of the word forgiveness that exists out there. And I found it kind of challenging to explain that, actually, to really explain what self-forgiveness really is, because it's got actually nothing to do with the definition of forgiveness that is out there. And perhaps a new definition, I would say, from my perspective, a new definition might be more close to the word, actually, of forgiveness, would be to give yourself back to yourself, to give back to yourself, through kind of weeding through your own minds, through releasing the beliefs, the judgments that you have in your mind, where you are basically constricting and limiting yourself, your expression, your perspective and perception of reality.
Yeah, you can play with the words a little bit, and it's like a giving for self.
Yeah.
Cool.
So let's also look at the why of self-forgiveness, meaning, why would you do self-forgiveness? What's the point, purpose, and goal of applying and practicing self-forgiveness? Dan, what would you say is your why of self-forgiveness? Meaning, who are you within doing it, and what has been your starting point within, starting this process of self-forgiveness and walking it, and what do you do it for?
I would say the word care is what comes up. It's like the reason I would give a gift is that it's like a deep caring, and so walking the application of self forgiveness, kind of like thoroughly and seriously and authentically, genuinely, being able to give myself understanding, and be able to kind of more reach my potential, that I can become as a person, like a good person in the world, and let go of some of like the negative cycles and patterns that sometimes we'll get into, or even like some, for an example, if I was feeling depressed or some kind of a depression energy, and like doing a forgiveness, like I forgive myself that I've accepted and allowed myself to think that this is all that is here for me in this life, and kind of continue to specify for myself that, and then within that also like focus on, I can completely diminish that energy and recreate myself and my perception and experience of myself. And it really is, it's a tool to unlock like a whole new world of understanding, and it's one of the coolest things I've come across on the internet.
Yeah, I can really relate to that. And also what you mentioned with, that it comes from a point of care, which is kind of an interesting point, because what I found is that, like, on the one hand, you do care enough about yourself to walk that process of self-forgiveness, to set yourself free from the shackles and the bounds of the mind. But on the other hand, you are dealing with your mind, who is like constantly trying to sabotage you within that process. And I don't know if you're familiar with things like affirmations, where you kind of look into the mirror, or you write down like statements, or you say statements to yourself like, I care about myself, or I accept myself, or I am good enough, things like that.
Yeah,
Where
that's a cool.
where I would try and do that, but it's like in some part of my mind, I always thought, nah, I don't really care about myself. I'm just lying to myself, so. But with self-forgiveness, it's like that point of care comes from deeper inside of yourself. Because it's like, here comes your mind telling you, come on, you're not really going to forgive yourself. You don't really care about yourself. Come on, who do you think you are? You're just lying to yourself. But with self-forgiveness, it's like, you're not just telling yourself stuff. You're not just trying to convince yourself of stuff. You're like kind of walking into this open space where you just kind of open yourself up, and you don't really know what's going to be on the other side. And the point of care is just within you taking that step, within you kind of looking at your mind and going, okay, I see what you're saying, but you know what? I'm just going to take the step. It's like challenging yourself, just that point of pushing yourself despite all the stuff that your mind is coming up with. It's just like giving yourself that opportunity to take a step, take a leap of faith, so to speak. Not even faith, it's just take that step. Just kind of put yourself into the unknown in a way.
Yeah, and it's kind of a weird stepping into the unknown, because not only is it unknown, but it also seems like what is good, what I'm going to be on the other side, as something I can't connect with. And like, yeah, if you're having these like self-defeatist thoughts, or like you're down on yourself, or like with the depression or anything like that, it seems like an impossible situation that you just are going to have to cope with. And so giving yourself the opportunity to try forgiving yourself, and from like a genuine place, is like a real gift of opening up and moving through into a whole new perception and outlook that you can't see from the other side. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And also because it's not about, kind of trying to move past those self-defeating thoughts. It's like, if the self-defeating thoughts are there, you kind of look towards them and go, oh, okay, that's interesting. Let me take this on with self-forgiveness and see where that leads me. That kind of, it's like you invite your mind into yourself so that you can look at it, so that you can, walk through it and be like, I do have the power to actually really kind of, I wouldn't say take control of my mind, but I suppose take control of myself in relation to my mind, so that I'm not like this victim that is victimized by those self-depreciating thoughts, but where I'm like, I suppose, like an explorer, and I take on my mind, no matter what comes up.
Yeah, empowered, and like a director of yourself, instead of letting the thoughts move you around. And the other point I'm thinking now is that it's not like a coping mechanism where I'm doing another suppression or trying to get around the self-defeating thoughts, like you were saying. But self-forgiveness really is a solution to embrace it, and then kind of like breathe and release and move on, like, and let go. That's cool.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's not a coping mechanism where you try to either ignore or avoid or suppress or not look at, where it's like you're being moved by the fear of the thing itself, the fear of your mind or your thoughts or your emotions. But with self-forgiveness, it's like that point of care, it's just taking that step of kind of looking at it, facing it. And from there, taking it on in a self-empowered way.
Not running, but going right into it, facing it, and then getting
Mm-hmm.
through it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something that oh man, that I've realized with walking self-forgiveness, because like had always had a tendency to victimize myself in relation to fears, in my mind, like victimize myself to my thoughts, where I really kind of built up this whole personality within myself of believing that I am a victim of my own thoughts, that my thoughts can, have power over me, and that like I am really small, and I always felt really small and really weak in relation to my own mind. But it is through self-forgiveness that I learned to empower myself, where it's not about, like, you don't already have to be empowered. You don't already have to take in some kind of empower, but try to empower yourself in order to do self-forgiveness. It's like you just apply self-forgiveness and you will learn to empower yourself. You will realize what self-empowerment really is, And it's like that kind of gentle movement that is really awesome, because what I found is that with any other technique, there's always like this kind of point where you feel like you have to have some kind of skill. You have to already be able to do something. You have to already be able to accept yourself or love yourself, or, that's
Yeah.
how I always kind of experience things. So then eventually I would just kind of let it go and think that's not for me. I just can't empower myself. I'm just not an empowered individual. What can I do? But, with self-forgiveness, it's like the empowerment exists within just you, within the simple fact of you taking yourself by the hand and going step by step by step through this process of self-forgiveness, which is like really simple and gentle and easy. And you just kind of give yourself the time and the space that you need to walk this process.
Yeah, and for any new people to self-forgiveness, it may seem like such a foreign concept, and so like, oh, I can't, it's like there's so many different things that could come up for why you wouldn't do it. But I think in taking the first step to write it out is like practice, and then speak it out as well. Like just taking those first steps is like, it may just be a little step. It may just be like, I forgive myself that I was mad today, or something simple. And then like kind of a progression into more deeper stuff will just unfold almost naturally. So really
Mm-hmm.
starting is a key.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I remember when I started doing self-forgiveness, I was like, I guess I kind of understood that it's going to be a process, that it's just a matter of like getting to it. Like, I didn't even necessarily immediately expect results, so to speak. I was just writing pages upon pages upon pages. And eventually, with having faced so many moments of resistance and having walked through so many kind of moments where I faced my mind in ways where I believed that, oh, it's not working, or self-forgiveness doesn't work, or I've been able to walk through all of those moments and get to a point where I can really, where I'm empowered in relation to those kind of self-sabotage techniques in the mind, where I see that, many of those don't actually have that power over me anymore.
Yeah.
Because I just kept on pushing, I kept on moving myself, I kept on walking this process, because I could see that, it did assist me to move through energies, move through experiences.
Cool.
So maybe we can have a look at, as we already kind of mentioned, the word forgiveness. And what is the difference between forgiveness and self-forgiveness? We already kind of touched on it, but where does that word come from, forgiveness? And why is it that even though forgiveness has been around as a term in people's awareness, why is it that we don't apply it? Why is it that we do have a tendency to hold on to blame and resentment and anger towards others or towards ourselves? Why is it that forgiveness has never been an actual practical real application that people do to release those points. Dan, can you maybe give your perspective on this point?
Yeah, it's definitely it's an interesting question because I'm thinking of right now another book that I found a while back called Radical Forgiveness, and it did touch on it did like develop the word of like what it actually is forgiveness and how is it a tool of like how do you live this word. And I think largely in the cultures of past times, it's been just so heavily associated with religion and as a point of something where you can only get forgiveness from God. And that kind of like separation, it makes it just like untouchable in a way. Like it's really hard to connect with forgiveness. It's like I don't have any control over it. And it becomes really hard to make it tangible and livable in our lives. So, so just might as well, go watch TV or something because what is forgiveness? So,
Yeah, like forgiveness is something you need to get from somebody else.
right, yeah, it's not something that you can give to yourself. I mean, that's pretty crazy. That's almost like like a cutting edge concept in a way. Almost it maybe even seem like a sin to do because it's supposed to be God's work, right?
Right, yeah.
So I don't
Would
know.
you?
It's interesting how tainted the word is and how important it is at the same time.
Yeah. And also with it being associated with religion, what I'm also kind of seeing in that as to why it is that we actually have kind of a resistance to the word forgiveness itself, is because with religion, it's to my experience, it's always been something where you're told you need to be forgiving. These are this is what it means to be a good person. You have to be forgiving. You have to unconditionally be able to forgive your neighbor. But within that, it's like what you're actually being told is you're a bad person because you can't forgive. Because we experience blame, we experience anger. These things come up in our mind on a daily basis. We go into reactions. So in a way, it's like we kind of look into ourselves and go, well, I'm not forgiving, so I'm not like Jesus. I'm not a good person because I'm not living in the way that I should be living to really be a good and benevolent person. So what I suppose religion has created within that is that people actually on kind of more subconscious, unconscious levels resist the term self-forgiveness or resist the word forgiveness or the idea of forgiveness because it actually kind of confronts us with, being a bad person, like, because we realize that, oh, I'm not forgiving, so therefore I'm not a good person.
And on the other side of that, I'm just now looking at how maybe imagining someone who is really forgiving is kind of like almost at a disadvantage in a certain way because they're not they're not participating in the game of like keeping score and like this ego stuff. So they can be taken advantage of if they're forgiving, right? So
Yeah, but you know what? Actually, that's very interesting that you mentioned that because it's a point I was looking at recently as well. Is that I've always tried to really be a goody two shoes my entire life, almost religiously, where it's like I try to be really benevolent and whenever there's what I've realized with myself is that with trying to be a good person, yes, you get taken advantage of because not so much because you are truly forgiving, but because you, with me, you kind of tend to suppress the reality of your own mind, of who you really are inside of yourself, and therefore, with suppressing it, you're also not going to see it in other people. You're not going to see it anywhere because you're suppressing it. You're not looking at it. And what I've always found is that this kind of tendency or desire to be a good and benevolent person, to try and be forgiving without really necessarily knowing what it means to truly apply self-forgiveness, what I found is that the consequences of that is that I just ended up being in massive conflict with myself, because I'm just constantly fighting all the thoughts of judgment that come up. Every time there's a judgment coming up in my mind that I have about someone else, I'm like, oh my God, no, I can't think that way. No, that's bad. I have to, I have to be forgiving. I have to be good. So it's like I almost immediately feel guilty about having that thought, and then immediately try and suppress it.
In which case, no solutions come forward.
Exactly, because it's still there. And, if anything, you just end up kind of in total denial of yourself, and also feeling victimized in relation to your own mind. Because this stuff is coming up. This stuff has been coming up throughout my entire life. I've just always kind of been fighting it within this idea that I have of, I need to be a good person. But what I never realized is that, through self-forgiveness, I actually was able to realize that there is no good and bad. Like, the mind and the fact that we do judge, that we go into blame, that we go into anger, it's not necessarily a bad thing. That's not, maybe religion has created that idea that those judgments, that it's bad for you to covet your neighbor's possessions, or it's bad for you to go into jealousy, it's bad for you to desire power and fame. And all those things that actually do exist in our mind is all bad. But, actually it's not. It's the reality of who we are. It's what is here. And in order to really kind of change these things, or walk beyond that, or see beyond it, you need to firstly just embrace what is here. And I realized through self-forgiveness that I've never actually done that. I've just always existed in conflict of it.
That's an interesting point, definitely.
Oh.
Hello.
Oh, hold on.
I'll just say that self-forgiveness, the aspect of taking responsibility.
Hold on.
All right, cool. Stage is mine. All right, so with self-forgiveness and taking responsibility for a particular point, it's really like, it is like embracing the point, and instead of judging the point or being, the sins would be something that are bad. If I see that I'm always bad and kind of accept that it's bad, it's like I'm separating myself from that point of being able to embrace.
Sorry about that.
Welcome back, Kim.
Somebody wanted to get urgently into the building, so I had to step out for a moment, and Molly was just losing her mind. Molly? Oh, sweetie.
Cool. I was speaking about how self-forgiveness and like how you're saying how it's like, if you think that it's something that's bad, then you kind of like, you're removing yourself from the ability to take responsibility for it and like embrace it, which self-forgiveness supports that embracing, and rather than judging a certain aspect of ourselves. Your mic is muted.
Oh, okay, sorry.
There you go.
I was saying yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
Cool.
And yeah, like what I've realized is that what religion, from my perspective and experience, like what religion has done is like create an extra layer on top of the mind, on top of our kind of pre-programmed tendencies to blame, to go into reactions and stuff, where religion just kind of, through creating those ideas and ideals of what it means to be a good person and what it means to be forgiving, it's like an extra layer on top of the mind, where all that it does is just make sure that we never investigate ourselves, that we never move through any of those things that we judge as bad, because we judge it.
Yeah.
So in a way, it's like we keep bumping up against it, but we never like move through it.
Yeah, it seems like it's in a way intellectualized, that because it's like, you're you're studying your Bible, and then you're like kind of thinking, oh, forgiveness, and you're like kind of learning about it up here in a way, rather than having it be like a really physical process, like from your heart, kind of like substantiating forgiveness, making it real.
Yeah, like, and I guess everything is intellectualized.
Mm.
Like all the values that we have, like being forgiving, or being a good person, being friendly, being nice, being what else is there? Having integrity, being authentic, being real, being honest. Like everything is intellectualized in terms of, it's all like these values that we place on ourselves of like, I have to do all these things and be all these things because that's what it means to be a good person. So within that, I feel like we tend to suppress all the negative stuff that's there, all the stuff that goes against those values,
Exactly.
just so we can be a good person.
Mm. Yeah. Mess up. It's really like quite a mess up, because then it's just not grounded, not livable.
Yeah, exactly. So speaking of intellectualizing, that's also an interesting point that we were looking at before the hangout, that was interesting to discuss as well in relation to self-forgiveness, is the tendency of the mind to, or our tendency to intellectualize things. Like what I've noticed with myself, for instance, is that sometimes when I'm applying self-forgiveness, I'll go into my mind and like I start thinking about the next thing to say, like how to voice my self-forgiveness, how to place my self-forgiveness, what do I say, how do I say it, trying to do it the right way in order to move through this point. But usually I end up feeling frustrated because I'm not just allowing the self-forgiveness to flow just in the moment, to be here. I'm not allowing myself to just kind of take it moment by moment because of the tendency to intellectualize things.
And I think there too, it's not necessarily a bad thing if that's what you do when you start out, because it is for self forgiveness to just flow and be natural. It doesn't just start off that way. You know, I mean, it could potentially, but like I feel like when I get into really like genuine real time forgiveness, like if I'm speaking it and it's like it's coming out in a sense where it's like the words that come out are very much aligned with what I'm forgiving. Sometimes it's not always that smooth. Sometimes it's like choppy and
Right.
it's a
Yeah.
little bit intellectualized at first.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'm talking more about like just sometimes I forget that, like I forget myself when I'm speaking self-forgiveness. And it's
Interesting.
actually a point that I had to realize just a week ago, again, where I was like speaking self-forgiveness a lot about a point, and like the point was just not moving, and I was still in this weird kind of experience, and it was just not going away. And I was just, at a certain point, I was going into even thoughts about like giving up, like it's not gonna work, and I'm just gonna fucking give up. And then I was like, okay, I see what's going on. Like I noticed that with that point of giving up, I have just victimized myself in relation to self-forgiveness itself. Like I believed that self-forgiveness is going to be this magical tool that's going to just make everything go away. And I didn't realize that self-forgiveness it's like, it's an extension of myself. If I'm not already actually, in a way, I already need to stand as the solution. I already need to realize my own power to live the solution, to break through this point that I'm trying to break through, that I'm trying to change. I need to actually already place myself in the point of change, and from there, use self-forgiveness to kind of move myself there, even though I'm already kind of there.
That's really interesting though. It's like it becomes like a compass or like a guide for as you're doing the forgiveness. And that, like how you're speaking it, it sounds like it makes it really genuine, because you see the point, you're holding it while you're doing the forgiveness. There's the release and the responsibility together.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
good.
like yeah, I guess that's also, if if you were to think that self-forgiveness doesn't work, if you're a person who has tried it and you're like, well, I've tried it, but it just doesn't work for me, then this might be something to look at, because, you might just be kind of victimizing yourself in relation to self-forgiveness, meaning that you're not realizing that you are the one who has to actually empower yourself, who has to move through this point. Self-forgiveness is just like a tool, it's just something you can use, but it's still you using it, and it's like an expression of you. So you can't expect self-forgiveness as this thing, to be this thing outside of yourself that's going to do everything for you.
Yeah, like it's not some magical pill that you can just take and let that do all the work. It really is like, it's a tool in the sense that you have to leverage yourself, move yourself through forgiveness to have it be real.
Yeah, and it's like you have to like be very specific when you apply it, when you're like speaking self-forgiveness. What I found in that moment when I realized that, oh, I just forgot about myself, I just kind of, it's like a movement inside of myself where I went, I forgive myself, that I have accepted and allowed myself to victimize myself in relation to self-forgiveness. So it's like, really like, I am here and this is what I'm doing and this is where I'm headed. This is how I direct myself. It's like self-empowerment. Very
cool. Yeah, it's good to distinguish that from just doing it like rote, like kind of droning on self-forgiveness, which, it's not going to be nearly the same.
Yeah, it's not going to do anything.
Yeah, doing it like within your breath and within your body, it's really substantial. It can be.
I think that we are just about at the end of the Hangout, and my battery is almost going to die. Unfortunately, I did not plug it in. And but I think that we covered quite a lot already, and I mean, I was already kind of expecting to do multiple Hangouts about self-forgiveness, because it's kind of a vast topic when you want to get into the how-to and the when and where and everything about it, and like also the pitfalls to become aware of, which we also covered a little bit in this Hangout. So then, do you have maybe any last kind of comments or points that you would like to share before we go off?
One thing that I didn't say that I wanted to say was that self-forgiveness also I kind of see as like an opening up a space for then you to like then lay down the corrective application statements. So it's like, if I only did self-forgiveness but didn't actually move into like the change, which might be a good thing to pick up on the next Hangout.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, like the forgiveness it doesn't really do anything if I don't use that moment that I created through the forgiveness to like, okay, set down a new rule, a new system for myself to live by, kind of, and not because it's really easy to revert back into our old tendencies even after you apply forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
So the forgiveness being like something that creates a space for me to then now, all right, now here's the change I'm going to live. And if the old tendency would come back up again, then, I would apply self-forgiveness again and try to be more specific with it until the change comes through, which is the goal, the point.
Yeah, that's a very cool point to mention, and definitely something that I'll be covering in Hangouts to come, as well as the self-corrective and the self-commitment statements, and, as another tool of self-support to actually move into a real self-change. So thanks for bringing that up.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
And I think that we can wrap up the Hangout now. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.